There are several transactions that you'll see on the test. So you'll need to know what it is that I'm asking for. The first transaction that we did was to record the payroll. Where does that information come from?
The register.
The payroll register. Record the payroll. There is not any cash involved in that. We're just taking the information from the payroll register and recording it. So on the test, if I ask you to record the journal transaction, to record the payroll, it's coming from the payroll register. The first two numbers, or the first three numbers, or the first number is going to be the last column or columns on the payroll register. Remember, I told you those numbers have to be the gross amount. That's the amount that we're going to expense, whether we have office or production or sales, wages, I don't know how our accounts could be listed, but that's our gross amount for those last columns on the payroll register, the amount we're going to expense. Why do we have to expense the gross amount and not the net amount?
Because the gross, like the net amount's what we paid them, which
Exactly.
is the expense minus all of like the things that we took out of the check.
The expense minus everything that we withheld. Now, we held out from our employees' checks all of these things, but that's not income for us, is it? It's money that we have to pay someplace else later. It's a liability. We're just holding it until we make those payments. So all of those accounts, even the union dues, I think, should probably be called union dues payable, because we're holding that and then we're going to make the payment. So these numbers are everything that we withheld on the payroll register. That's why your totals are so important. Not only does it make it easier for me to grade, but it also gives you that number. The last credit is going to be the net amount, and it's called wages and salaries payable, or wages payable, or salaries payable. If we have people that earn a salary and hourly people, our account is probably called wages and salaries, but it has that magical word on the end of it, payable. We haven't paid it yet. We've calculated it, and this is just to record it. All right, so that's transaction number 1. On the test, if I say record the payroll, that's what it looks like. Easy enough, isn't it? Remember your year, the date, and give me a description. The second transaction that we have is to record the payroll taxes. Whose responsibility will the payroll taxes be?
The employers.
The employer. Right? The employer has to match what we withheld from the checks for the FICA OASDI and the FICA Medicare. We're matching it. If we were to look at the T accounts for those two accounts, we'd have that same number in there twice on the credit side. Once for recording the payroll, and the second one for recording the payroll taxes. We're not paying anything yet, are we? We're just recording it. So we have payroll tax expense, which would be the total of everything that the employer has to pay. Matching OASDI, matching Medicare, paying the SUTA and the FUTA. Now remember, the SUTA and the FUTA do not go on the payroll register. The employee does not have to pay that. Now if you were doing payroll in your business, could you have a column for SUTA and FUTA? You really could. You know, if you want everything there together and you want to know what numbers you use to calculate that, you could put those columns on there, but it's only the employer that has to pay it. It's usually a small number, especially if the company does a good job of keeping their employees working and they don't lay people off. Right, so they could get a credit against their percent, so it could be a very small amount. That one is just $6.48. On your test, if it's $640, you know it's wrong. You've put your decimal in the wrong place. Even if it's $64, you need to go back and look at it. Make sure you put your decimal in the correct place. How easy is it to put that decimal in the incorrect place when you're multiplying it on your calculator? It's very easy. All right, so this is to record the payroll taxes, and again, I have the pay period ending and whatever date that is. That's the second journal entry. What's the third one? And it's the one that's not in the book.
Payroll cash?
We're going to transfer the money that we need to make the payroll into that new account that we're calling payroll cash. That transaction is not in your book. You'll see it on Billy's Market, and you'll see some questions about it on the test. I don't know why they left it out. I don't think it's even mentioned. But most businesses transfer the amount of money that they need. And where did that amount come from, that $4,886?
It's the net pay total.
Yeah, which is on the payroll register, or it's the wages and payables.
But there it is. It is the net amount. That's the amount that we're going to be paying out. So we just transferred the money to that payroll cash account.
Oh,
Question?
can you put it back
Oh,
up?
I think I just put transfer funds
Yeah,
to
transfer
payroll
funds
cash.
To payroll, okay. Okay.
Just transfer the funds.
For
And I
pay
put
period.
the whatever pay period it is. Right, the next one is going to be to pay the payroll. There's our payroll cash. That's where the money's going to be coming from, and the wages and salaries payable. So now wages and salaries payable, when we make this payment, should be a zero, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Should come to a zero. And the payroll cash, once all of the checks have been cleared, that account should have a zero balance. Some of you are still writing down. Now this is where Billy's Market picks up. Because the first journal entry, and we did it in the demo on Tuesday. That's to record the payroll. Right, this is where Billy's Market starts. It's asking you to make the payment to pay the payroll taxes.
It's no
When we're making a payment, that's when cash is involved in the transaction. Why can we pay the two FICAs and the federal income tax in one transaction?
It's all going to the federal government. same
This
place.
is federal payments. Could we have a separate transaction for the FIT?
Yes.
You could, right? But if we're asking to make the payment, and I'm telling you it's the federal payments that are due on the, remember it's the 15th of the next month, we could pay the FICA OASDI payable, the FICA Medicare payable, and the federal income tax payable. The first two numbers, those should be double the amounts that were on the payroll register. We're paying what the employee owes, and we're paying what the employer matched. Is this transaction 4? This is where we're making the payments. And when we make the payments, then we have cash. Okay, we did several of those transactions in the demo the other day. We actually did it for October, November, and December. I don't know whether I did the other transactions or not. If we wanted to pay the state income tax, what would that transaction look like? I'm looking to see if I have an example of one. I don't. If we were going to pay the state income tax, it's going to be a credit to cash and a debit to the SIT payable. All of our problems may not have a state income tax. Remember, in the state of Texas, we don't have a state income tax. And then if we are going to pay the SUTA and the FUTA, it has to be 2 separate payments. We might be a quarterly company where we only pay on the quarter. We could be that we just pay it once a year. If you record the SUTA and the FUTA payment, I'm not going to take off, but on some of our problems, we don't have to make that payment for that particular month. Okay, SUTA and FUTA, and it would be the payable as the debit, and then a credit to the cash. Now on Billy's Market, if you'll just get out your, do we have any questions on those transactions before we move to Billy's Post? You're going to get a chance to see those transactions again. No? Remember before we started the payroll, I told you that I think that these 2 chapters are probably the most difficult chapters that we have. It's a lot to remember, and it's a lot of calculating, and it's a lot of behind the scenes calculating when you have a wage base. A couple of you came in to ask me some questions about your homework with the wage base. What was the wage base that we had for the OASDI on one of our problems?
106,800.
106,800. So if we have someone that has made, it's what was it again? 106. And I never ask you to remember that number. 106 what?
800.
I never ask you to remember those numbers or the percents. I'll give those to you on the test. But if we have someone that already has cumulative earnings of 107, do we need to calculate the OASDI for that person? They're already at 107. We don't have to. Let's say that person, though, is at 106.
So it would be the 800.
And they made $1,000 in the next pay period. How much of the $1,000 that they earned would we have to use to calculate the taxes? They made 106.
800.
Only 800 of that 1,000. Right, so you have to look at this. I like to put the wage base at the top of the column, and then you'll have a cumulative before that pay period. That's the number that you need to look at. How far away are they to the 106,800? If they're already there, we don't calculate for that person. Now that's probably only going to happen when we get into the year, first quarter, everybody probably has to pay. I don't know that, it would be nice to have a check that's that much for a month, but it's usually after we get into the year that we'll see people that are over the 106. Now for the Medicare, we don't have a wage base, we calculate it on all of it. I have to give you all of that information in the problem. The book has to give you all of that information in the problem. I'll give you this number, I'll give you the wage base. Our other wage base was 7,000, so if someone has earned over 7,000, then we don't calculate it again. So we have to do some individual calculations. If we were using a computerized system, it would just flag it. If it's this amount greater than or equal to this amount, we don't calculate it. We'd have an if-then clause in our program to say we're not gonna calculate on that because they've already met that wage base. So on some of your problems, you had to really look at that to see what portion of what they earned for this current pay period do we need to calculate. All right? I think that's probably the most tedious thing that you have to do on that payroll register is to calculate when you're using the wage base. Any questions on that? And I'll give you back your papers after I grade them so we can look at those before we take the test. So that's why we'll have the week in between giving back the papers and taking the test. Could you do some extra problems in my accounting lab or some extra exercises in there? Could you do the problems in my accounting lab and then do them on paper? Good, because it gives you immediate feedback. So they're all open if you want to do any more. All right, then let's move to Billy's Market. And this is our second comprehensive problem. I don't know why it's so fuzzy on there. Probably because it's picking up what I have on the back side of it. All right, the comprehensive review problem aids in putting the pieces of payroll together. In this project, you are the bookkeeper and have the responsibility of recording the payroll in the payroll register, recording the payroll in the journal, paying the payroll, recording the employer's tax responsibilities, posting to the ledger accounts, and paying the tax deposits, as well as completing the quarterly report. Billy's Market, owned by Billy Timberlake, is located at 1456 Maryland Lane, Boston, Massachusetts, 01975. His employer identification number is 424583312. Please assume the following. Why do we need all of that?
For the 940.
We need it for the form, okay? Because we have to fill out that top portion. This is what your test will look like. I have to give you some information. The FICA OASDI is 6.2% on $106,800 per employee per year. FICA Medicare is 1.45% on all earnings per employee per year. SUDA 4.9% due to favorable merit rating on the first 7,000 per employee per year. FUDA 0.8%, see how tiny that number is? 0.8% on the first 7,000 per employee per year. Employees are paid monthly. The payroll is recorded on the last day of each month and paid on the first day of the next month. The FIT table for the IRS is attached. Is everybody married or single? I can't remember what it did on that one. Everybody's married? Okay. State income tax is 7% on all earnings. Employee paychecks are numbered consecutively, starting with number 63. The following are the employees of Billy's Market, along with their monthly salary, exemptions, and other information. Now, if you started right with the payroll register, because that's what you know, that's okay, but we had to do something else first. when we go to the next page and look at the instructions. All right, so some of you are already working on that payroll register because I've checked some of yours. We have a partial listing of the ledger with the accounts and balances. Will you look in your ledger to make sure that cash, not cash, it's the FICA payable has this balance, that all of these have the balance all the way down to the SUTA tax payable, that I already recorded those in there. Are they in there?
Yes.
And if you'll notice, I think on the line, if I did it correctly, it should say, does it say balance? It should have the word balance, and it should have a check mark, because those were numbers that I just gave you. Now, if you were starting this from a simulation that didn't have those balances already filled in, you'd have to go put those balances in. We're not starting with a brand new company. Somebody else already did the payroll for last month. And they've recorded it. And they've posted it. We don't have a copy of that, but what page in the journal did we start with?
3.
So there were 2 pages of journal entries that were already processed in that business before we started picking up. And we just got hired, and now we have a task that we need to do. It says, using the general journal, ledger accounts, payroll register, and Form 941 provided, please complete the following. On January 15th, record and post the entry to pay the December 2011 Form 941 taxes. Somebody already did the payroll register. Somebody already recorded all of the transactions for us, and they already posted it. So what do we have to pay on the 941? What do we have to pay? There's 3 things.
FICA, both of them, and then FICA, OESDI, FICA Medicare, federal income tax.
Okay, 3 things. So let's go to the ledger, or we can look at those partial balances that I gave you on that, or balances that I gave you on the partial chart of accounts. Do you see them? What do we owe for the OASDI payable?
975.
$975. What do we owe for the Medicare payable? $247.50. What do we owe for the FIT payable?
$860.
$860. All right, I want to make sure everybody knows where those numbers are coming from. You could get them from 2 different places. You can get them from the ledger pages. If I didn't give you this, you still would know what we need to pay, wouldn't you? Because you would just go to the ledger. We're paying 3 things. So our first transaction, and this was for the December payroll.
So there would be debits, those 3, and then cash,
There it is.
credit?
2012, January 15th, we pay on the 15th day of the next month. You won't have these numbers yet, because mine's already posted. Oh, it got bright. I don't know why, but it did. Okay. All right, so we have the FICA OASDI payable, $975.90. Do you see where that number came from?
Yes.
Okay. Then we have the FICA Medicare payable, $247.50. And we have the federal income tax. You need to add those 3 up. That's the amount of our cash payment. Those 3 added together should be $2,083.40. Now, I would like for you to post that transaction. when you're doing this on your own, you may want to record a few transactions and then bring it up and let me check it. Because once you post it, then if you've made a mistake, you've got to erase where you've posted. But we know this one is correct. So let's post to those 4 accounts. Is the white book coming around with the calendar on it? Oh, did you circle that? Now this is just like the one we did in the demo, but now you're going to post it and you'll get to see what happens to those accounts when we post. This is just Calendar Pro, a very inexpensive calendar program. If any of you decide you're going to start your own business, and you can personalize it for all of your clients. Here, I'll let the people at home that are watching my video see it. Because you all don't get to see the show and tell.
I have a quick question. Is that supposed to be 2009 or what is supposed to be 2009?
I don't remember what date y'all are using. You're using 2011. Oh, mine, what is January 12th? Because it's the 15th of the next month.
We don't have to put an explanation, do we?
It is, I just wrote
No.
deposit.
I'm sorry, on the,
No, when you're posting the explanation column in the ledger, we usually leave that blank unless it's beginning balance, unless it's adjusting or closing entries. We usually leave it blank. Now, if we have terms when we get into accounts receivable and accounts payable and discounts, we can write the terms in there, but usually we leave that blank. Now, when you post, what's happening to those 3 accounts?
closing.
They're going to a 0. And when we have a 0, remember 2 horizontal lines in the debit and the credit on the balance side to indicate that it's 0.
2 what? 2
Horizontal lines in the debit and credit column on the balance. Just to indicate that it's 0. Don't leave anything blank in accounting or it looks like you've left something off. Now that was transaction 1 on January 15th. I would put a little check mark beside that or draw a line through the date so that you know you finished that transaction. Because if you look, how many transactions do you have? There's quite a few. Okay. Can we go to the second transaction? Anybody still need time to post?
That says December, deposit December.
I know, it really should be 2010. Oh no, 2011.
Yes.
Yeah. This is one that I created, and so when I try to update it with the year, I don't always change my key.
I just need a little bit more time.
And we're just posting to those 4 accounts. And then remember, the last step is to bring the account number back over to the journal, so we know we've posted that one.
Still okay if I could use a highlighter, right?
You can still use a highlighter. I forgot to get your name tags out today, sorry. Slipping. But I think I'll keep them and just put them in the basket for the substitute on Tuesday. let's look at the next transaction. Again, put a check mark or a line through that first one because you're already finished with it. On January the 15th again, record and post the entry to pay the state income tax from last month's payroll. How much is the state income tax?
It is $192.50.
$192.50. Now it says we're making a payment, so what account do we have to use? Starts with a C.
Cash.
Cash. All right. SIT payable is our debit. Cash is our credit. And we have to remember, somebody already did the payroll register for us, so all we have to do is make the payments. When I make it bigger, then it really gets fuzzy. By description, I just put deposit December, and it should be 2011 on yours. And once you finish with that transaction, let's post that one.
It should be
Oh, it's over there, okay. I see it. All right, let's take the time to post this one.
Oh, that's right.
And when you post, then the SIT payable should become a 0.
No, to confuse me.
Let's put a little check mark on that one. It's the second transaction for the 15th. On January 31st, this is the third transaction. Record and post the entry to pay the state unemployment tax due from last quarter. What is the amount of the SUDA that we need to pay?
705.
705. So there's the transaction, the 31st. SUTA tax payable is our debit. Cash is our credit. My description, I made deposit for the fourth quarter, and it's 2011 tax, and then our amounts. And then go ahead and post that transaction. And when we post this transaction, then the SUTA tax payable should, let's see. Don't forget your account numbers in the journal as you're posting, just so you know that you've already posted that. Now, when we continue with the next 3 months from the payroll registers that you're going to be completing, the transactions are going to be the same, aren't they? The only one we didn't do is record the payroll. Somebody else already did that for us. The next transaction, still on the 31st, says to record and post the entry to pay the federal unemployment tax due from last quarter. What's the amount?
$115.
There's our transaction, 115. Oops, it went up too far, sorry. The 31st, 115. Debit to FUTA tax payable, credit to cash, and then let's go ahead and post that one. Should be 115. And you have it in two places. You have it in the ledger, and you have it on that partial trial balance that I gave you with balances. And then let's post these two. And then we'll turn the page, and we're ready to start with what some of you have already started, which is the payroll register. Now, my suggestion for today is that you work on that first month and let me check that payroll register, check those totals before you go to the next month. Take the time to post this one. Put a check mark that we finished that transaction. Put your account numbers in on the journal to indicate that you posted those. And then let's turn the page and look at the 31st again. It says complete the payroll register for January payroll and record and post the entry to record the payroll. Hint, hint, you'll see that on the test,
Oh,
okay?
and that's when we do all this.
Well, to record the payroll, all you're doing is just recording the information from the payroll register. Your two expenses, everything that we withheld, plus the net pay, and the debits and the credits should equal. Record the payroll.
So it's gonna be,
So when we look at the payroll register, what types of
it's gonna be.
employees do we have?
We have.
What do those last two
market and
columns
sales.
look like?
So it's gonna be market salary expense and sales salary expense that are gonna be debit.
Yes,
And the rest, well, the deductions are gonna be the credit.
yes. And then we'll also have a credit of the net pay. So on your payroll
Oh, yeah.
register, I would put a couple things up at the top. I would take the information that they gave us in the problem. The FICA OASDI is 6.2%. And what's the wage base? 106,800. I'd write that in. The FICA Medicare is 1.45% on all earnings. Bless you. The SUDA is 4.9%. The wage base is 7,000. The FUDA is 0.8%. Don't forget that little point there before the 8 on the first 7,000. And then our three employees are Frank Moe, or Mo Frank, I guess, Mary Jones, and Linda Lou. Cumulative earnings. What do we have on that first pay period? Did we have any?
No.
We didn't.
So that would be,
Those are just zeros. And I wouldn't leave it blank. I would put the 0 in.
with zero.
I would. Just so that you know we started with 0.
Yeah.
Right? We still have about an hour left. So let's work on that first month's payroll register. I know some of you have already started. So if you have, I really want to check that before you go to the next month. Anybody have a question that we might want to record before I turn off the camera? Anybody have a question about the Billy's Market? I didn't say how many hours it's going to take, but it will take a while. You have next Tuesday and next Thursday to work on it, as well as the other homework assignments, so you really don't have to do it outside of class. I'd rather that you do it in here and then get Dr. Darian or Mrs. Gunther to check your work. Is there any reason why it can't be a 100?
Unless it's like,
And in my little memo that I wrote to you, if you turn it in on Thursday next week, it's extra points because it will be early. Okay, it's not due until the day we take our test, but I really would like to have it early. That gives me a chance to get it graded before I do the progress reports.